From what I can determine, most of the back injuries that have happened are those that could have been prevented by the employee. These are injuries where if they had been lifting properly, if maybe they hadn't hurried quite as much, or if they had asked for help at a certain point, it would have prevented it.
Alan, is this conclusion based on the analysis of our accident reports?
Yes. We did a study over the last 3 years of our accidents to find out what employees were doing at the time of the accident. And we found that over half of the employees were injured when they were working with equipment and machinery, like trying to hook up a trailer, maybe lifting a tank, picking up a pump or something like that. Almost 20% of the injuries were involving lifting of product, you know, the 5-gallon cans and the 80-pound sacks, that sort of thing. And then 30% of the injuries were just kind of a conglomeration of everything else, working on mechanical repairs, jumping off the tractor, driving tractor, slipping and falling off a tank, things like that.
Alan, I was wondering if you can give Jeff and me some specific examples to better illustrate what type of accidents we are dealing with.
Sure. Let me show you some of the more common accidents that have taken place and resulted in a back injury. And then later, I want to share with you what Dr. McGann, our orthopedic surgeon, had to say about these accidents. You remember Joe's accident last March when he had an accident?
Sure do, Alan. In fact, as I was talking to Joe's manager the other day, and Joe's on disability. Joe was a very key man down there at that particular plant, and I guess they're having a heck of a time trying to find a replacement. Just can't find any temporary people to do Joe's job.
You know, he's a perfect example of these back injuries. Joe has been an excellent employee in our company. He's very experienced at his job. The truck showed up early one morning. He was by himself. Everybody was busy that morning. So he got the order from the driver, went on over and started mixing up this load of fertilizer. One of these hazards that probably should have been reported and taken care of. And he was trying to open up a hatch. The handle was real tight, so he got a big pipe wrench and he goes over there and he starts pulling and tugging on that thing. He pulled a back muscle. So he ends up in the hospital for a week, and as you say, he's still on disability.
Exactly. Even experienced people can have accidents. A lot of times they tend to have the attitude that, oh, that won't happen to me, and before they know it, it has happened to them, and they become a victim of an accident.
That's a real good point you make, Jeff. In fact, the fellow that comes to my mind is Hector.
Is that the young guy that hurt his back bagging fertilizer that time?
That's right, Alan. If you recall the incident, he was simply unloading 80-pound sacks of urea, but Hector tried to take a shortcut, and instead of positioning himself properly, he leaned over the pallet and tried to lift with his upper body only. As a result, he pulled a back muscle and it's kept him out for 6 weeks, and from what I understand, it's caused him a lot of pain also.
You know, there's another unfortunate thing on this is that Hector was making a very good wage while working, and while he's on workers' compensation disability, he's not making the money that he normally would. Hector's a family man, and I guess he's just having one heck of a time making ends meet while he's injured.
You know, Dave, you hit on a really good thing that came out in our report that we did on this, and that was that a lot of the injuries that are happening to our employees are happening to the younger employees. These are, you know, the big husky guys, the guys who feel that they can do anything, okay? Well, those kinds of fellows apparently just don't take the ordinary precautions that some of the older workers do, and as a result, they end up with injuries. They're a real target for back injuries.
Simple safety precautions and just plain common sense. It seems like accidents can happen even when you're doing things right. Take, for instance, Bob, one of our most trusted warehousemen. I guess he was in the warehouse and tripped over a pallet, ruptured 2 of his discs in his back. It's unfortunate, but it looks like he's going to have a permanent disability there and may have to be retrained to do some other type of work.
What are these accidents telling us?
Alan, I think we're headed in the right direction with the meeting we've had today. First, we've identified the ways the accidents are happening and the causes behind those accidents. Now, I think our next step is to convey the message to the employees that proper procedures and safe working habits can save them from a lot of unnecessary suffering.
That's absolutely right, Dave. You know, I told you I'd spoken with Dr. McGann, our orthopedic surgeon. Well, he has got some examples, some other examples, and he's also got some very good advice about backs. Dr. McGann, one of the biggest problems we're having in the way of injuries at PureGro for back injuries is the employees who are working with equipment and machinery, hooking up trailer hitches, lifting tanks, lifting pumps and other pieces of equipment, working with shanks. And it just seems as though those are the most predominant. I would say probably almost 55% of the injuries. Can you explain so that we can understand what's happening to our employees in these cases?
Well, I think that firstly we should spend just a short period of time explaining a little something about backs, so that people understand the mechanism of the backs and what actually happens to backs in various circumstances referable to injuries that they incur. And then a little later on we can then see actually in what occurs with certain accidents and what happens to the backs, and primarily that they don't cure themselves in a day or two. They are rather long-lasting when some of the more serious injuries occur. Firstly, I should like to point out for you the different musculature areas, the muscles of the neck, those that relate to the shoulder girdles, the muscles of the mid-back. You can see there are superficial groups, there are the intermediate groups, and the deep groups of muscle, and they're all very closely integrated as you go down into the back. And you can see that when one injures the back, he doesn't just pull one single muscle. It's usually a group of muscles that go, and it is important, the areas that are injured, because that's what determines the seriousness of the injury.
What happened in the case of Joe when he was in the mill and pulled up with that pipe wrench real hard? What happened to him in that injury?
Basically, as you can see in the musculature of the back, that this is primarily a muscle type of injury. He is applying steady pressure, increasing the pressure, keeps on increasing the pressure until finally something lets go, and it's normally the muscle or the muscle ligament structure that goes in the as evidenced by just the steady pull in deference to that of a rapid type of injury. Now, if we move over here and we look at the spine itself is made up of the vertebra of the neck, the vertebra that are attached to the rib cage, and then the more vulnerable part of the whole back are the last 5 vertebrae of the spine. This is the lumbar spine, which then attaches to the pelvis. Now, the vertebra has a weight-bearing structure through the back. The spinal cord runs directly down through the backs of these vertebrae. Each one of these green little segments are nerves coming out of between the vertebrae. The brownish-colored areas are the disc substance, and the back itself bends from close to the back, while as the front part is the area where the actual pressure is applied to these vertebrae. Now, as we apply forward pressure to the disc, you can see the disc close. As we open it up and go backwards, it opens. But you can see as we close it off to the front, the disc has a tendency to go out the back of the vertebra, and the nerve then has the pressure applied to that area.
And in the case of Hector, when he was lifting the bags and loading them onto the pallet, what happened?
Well, as you could see in the case of Hector, first thing that he was doing was he was filling these bags, and he twisted, which is the wrong way to lift. You always need to face the load when you're lifting. If you lift in a twisting position and then turn with the lifted load, and then as you could see, he didn't walk over to where he was going to set that sack down. He leaned way over, and the further he leaned over, it finally overcame his capabilities in his back, and again, he has an injury either to the muscle ligament structure, the joint mechanism, or maybe even the disc in this case. What happens to these people out in the field is that they have poor body mechanics in their lifting mechanisms. If you lift in an upright position with your legs and the load directly over the top of your lifting perpendiculars, then you will lift properly. If you bend over, and the further that you get from an upright position, the greater the forces are on the back. It's like putting a bar out on a wrench to get more mechanical advantage, and the pressures increase just greatly. So they have to learn how to lift, and they have to pay some attention as to how much they really should be lifting. I'd like to show you just one film. This film is a normal film of a back. You can see the system of bony bridges where the weight bearing is held. The spinal cord goes directly down through the hollow parts of this part of the vertebra. You can see each one of these is a normal disc. These are nice wide discs, no evidences of any disease. The vertebrae are clean, and this is a normal back. Now, Alan, as you remember in the case of Bob, where Bob is carrying this group of boxes, it's in front of him, he can't see where he's going, he trips over the pallet and falls. Now, these sudden types of injuries are the ones that put the disc injuries in the limelight. Rapid forward flexion or bending forward in stress positions are what really produce the disc injuries. And I'd like to show you a picture of a patient who had a severe disc injury done about 5 or 6 years before the film that I'm going to show you. Let's go firstly, this being a normal disc, this being a normal disc, but look what's happened to this disc down here. It's completely compressed, it has marked degenerative changes around it, and this patient is really in trouble, and this well could be a picture of Bob's back.
Doctor, what kind of advice would you give to our employees as to how they should handle themselves on the job?
Well, I think you can see by the illustrations of the different incidences that we had that there are several different things that are important. One, that they get themselves in a proper position to lift. Two, that they pay attention where they're going so that they can not fall or trip or do things that are simply avoidable. And three, particularly that when they're in bent over positions and doing any heavy lifting, that they recognize how much they can do and the position that they may have to get into, and that they ask for help when they need it and don't extend the back beyond its capabilities.
Jeff, what did you think of Dr. McGann's remarks?
I thought Dr. McGann's comments were excellent. His pointers on the back and how to prevent injuries was superb. The question I have is, how are we going to get the word out to the employees in the field?
You know, Jeff, I think that question can be answered by simply stating that an effective program must begin from the top, and by that I mean the president of the company. And from my discussions with him, I know he feels the importance of safety and the benefits that can be gained by overall employee awareness about safety. Safety program can only be effective with a shared cooperation between both the employee and PureGro.
You're the key to one piece, Steve. What can I do for you? Yes, do you have any idea we're going to continue working at 100 hours on the job or